You've probably never heard of the horse No Mail Today. No, scratch that. You have heard of the horse No Mail Today. You just don't know him by that name. My name's Frank Vespi. I'm here from Maryland Racing Today, part of the Midlantic Racing Today family of podcasts. Maryland Racing Today is powered by the Racing Biz, theracingbiz.com, presented by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club. You can like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, on and on and on. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that very much. A little bit later on our program today on Maryland Racing Today, John Piassek going to join me, and we're going to talk some of the news from Laurel this past week and also look ahead. A couple of really cool and popular horses going to be making their local debuts in 2026 this weekend at Laurel, so we're excited about that. But first, going to bring in Preakness-winning trainer Chad Summers. He's going to answer that question, who was No Mail Today, give us a little bit of his backstory, the journey he's been on, and good stuff, interesting story. I will warn you just a moment up front, a little bit of tech issues in recording that interview, so there will be a couple spots where it's not perfect. We apologize for that, but I think the interview itself is well worth getting through those minor glitches. Interesting stuff. So, who's No Mail Today? Let's bring in Chad Summers and find out. Happy to be joined here by Preakness-winning trainer Chad Summers. That sounds pretty good, huh? Preakness-winning trainer Chad Summers?
Yeah, it's that's something we can get behind, that's for sure.
One of the things I wanted to talk, there's a whole bunch of things I want to touch on, but one thing you referenced in your press conference after the Preakness was the journey, and that, you'd retired or almost retired a couple times, almost quit a few times. Talk about what it's taken to get where you've gotten to.
Well, it's not easy. Look, this is okay. It's one of those things to me where this is not something you can look at as a job. This is a passion-based industry that operates on dreams and nightmares. And it's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You wake up in cold sweats at 3:30 in the morning. You're doing night check at 9:30 at night, hoping that nobody's sick, that everybody's ate their food, that everybody's okay, nobody's got a fever. It's just it's an everyday thing. And there are times when you have things going your way, that everything's great. You win a few races, and when things go the other way and you're losing and social media says you're the worst trainer of all time, you try and block out the noise, and there's always things you learn over time. We got spoiled. When your first ever win as a trainer is a $2 million race in Dubai, it's you can only go down from there, I think. It probably should have just dropped the mic, taken the trophy, and walked away. But we kept going, and we've had a lot of highs and lows along the way. And obviously, last Saturday at Laurel, Maryland was certainly a high.
It's funny you say that, because another thing that struck me is you're there, you're doing the press conference, you've just won the Preakness, and at the same time, like out of one eye, we're watching the question. Out of the other eye, you're watching the 14th race because you got a horse in there. Is that how it is? Is it always sort of on to the next horse, the next thing?
Well, we're a small barn, right? So I think for us, every race kind of maybe hits a little bit differently than others. If you're one of these big mega barns with 150, 200 horses, you're running 10 horses a week, 6 horses a day, whatever. It's nothing. For us to run 2 horses or 3 horses that day, that's a lot. We almost never run 3 horses in a day. And this is a horse that we bought as a 2-year-old. We've been a little bit disappointed in. Didn't get into the race we wanted to run him in, and so he's already shipped down there. So we ran him in a race that maybe wasn't his ideal, surface and trip. And just because we won the Preakness, that shouldn't take anything away from the horse that's in the next race. And you have to have that mindset and the mentality. Yeah, you eat good off the stake horses, but it's your everyday horses. That's your everyday. And this one happened to be owned by the same people, but in other circumstances and situations, you owe it to as much to the next owner as you do for the one you just won the last race for.
Mhm.
And we love our horses, and we try and do our best with each and every one of them.
More satisfaction for you as a guy who you bought you bought Napoleon Solo, you didn't give a ton of money for him, pretty modest purchase, and then you find yourself in a Triple Crown race winner circle.
Yeah, look, that's always been my kind of specialty. Buying Mind Your Biscuits for 30,000, off the tracks for 50,000. One of the first horses I worked with, Castiglopo, was a $4,700 purchase that ran second in the Hopeful. We've done really well with that. Obviously, working for Gold Square has enhanced our purse strings, and we've been able to spend some money on horses like a Cyberknife and a Dry Powder that ran in the Breeders' Cup last year. But it's tough for me when I go to a sale, because I want to buy a horse and tell the owner, look him in the eye or her in the eye and say, we got a chance to be profitable in a business that's profit. And if I buy a horse for $400,000, I can't tell you, Frank, that this horse is going to for sure win a grade 1 or a grade 2. And if I can't tell you that, I can't tell you that you're going to be profitable. If I buy a horse for 40,000, I can say, if we don't mess it up, hopefully the horse can win a race or two, and we're going to be okay on the horse. You're not going to get hurt on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything can happen at any time, and we understand it, and we've seen all that kind of stuff. But, at $40,000, $50,000, the way the purse structure is set up right now, especially with these maiden auction races, it gives yourself a puncher's chance, and it allows you the opportunity to play at the biggest levels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Al Gold Square, you mentioned he's got a little more money. He can play at a little different level, but does he sort of appreciate that approach?
Sometimes.
When it works.
When we bought this horse, I was originally supposed to be for a different client, and they backed out. And I love the horse, and I called Al. And Al was convinced at the time that cheaper horses, and we bought a few. I bought a horse off a farm for $6,000 named Tuna Surprise, and we bought a few other cheap ones along the way that hadn't worked out with him. I've done well with others, and he was convinced that cheaper horses don't work out. And when we bought the horse, his name was actually No Mail Today, because he said after that price point, he's going to be a Sunday horse, not a Saturday horse. So there's no mail on Sunday. Once he saw the ability the horse had, we quickly changed his name to Napoleon Solo, and the rest is history. But that's where you're at. And for me, sometimes when you buy a horse, less expensive, people say, "What's wrong with it?" When we had all these stud farms coming to look at the horse and everything, how did you get it for 40,000? Does he have a host? Where does he have 3 legs instead of 4? Oh, we just the right place, the right time. When you don't concentrate entirely on the pedigree, when you don't make big deals of so many different things, when you overlook certain things, and just buy the horse who's an athlete, it goes a long way.
So this Paco thing came up with the PETA and the whip rolls and all that crap. I mean, did you look at that when you heard about that? So was that sort of a roll your eyes moment, or were you thinking like, oh crap?
Look, yeah. Unfortunately, Paco has always been in the eye of the storm. Some of it being self-afflicted, some of it being people jumping on after it's self-afflicted. He doesn't have the best relationship sometimes with his fellow jockeys. And so he has a target on his back. And I mean, watching the race live and then watching the replays 1,200 times the next day, I didn't see anything. PETA tried to make it into a thing. But it's also ironic because they said, well, the riding props aren't safe. And so we changed the riding props. So now it's like a popper, and it's more sound than it is feeling. So it doesn't even change. And then they go, well, you can't and do this, you can't do. I think it was kind of the way that he rides, and he gets so low on the horse, and when he's looking back behind him, it just looks more than it actually is. And that's how it kind of came across.
Yeah, that's kind of what the steward said, that he's busy on a horse and he's looking back and this and that. And it may look like things are happening that are not happening. So that gets to something you said a couple times in some interviews that I've seen, are that you think a lot of things in this industry need reform. I wonder what a couple of those might be.
I don't know. We have enough time on this podcast to go over all them. Look, at the end of the day, the one thing for us that we feel like is we need to work together as an industry. The sales, the breeding, the racetracks, the backside. There's been a really much of a disconnect between the front side and the backside, which has been uncomfortable. There's government agencies that are involved that they want to work with us, and we try and work with them, and they don't get back to you. There's a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm hoping that maybe, with have a little bit of success, maybe, some of these platforms and doors will open up. I told Mike Rapoli's team the other day, whenever you have that meeting with the Jockey Club that's been so well publicized through social media over the last 3 or 4 months, I'd love to be there, even if I have to keep my mouth shut, just to be there and learn and listen. And, that's what we need as an industry. It's not good. And I brought this up at the press conference, Frank, but when Aqueduct Racetrack in New York is closing, when Laurel Racetrack in Maryland is closing, these aren't some moms and pops tracks, in the middle of nowhere. This is Maryland and New York, where we have major tracks and so much history at those two facilities. It's a shame, and for us to take it lightly and just be like, well, we're building a new Pimlico, we're building a new Belmont. Look at the pretty pictures. It doesn't solve the bigger problem we have. We struggle with field size. We struggle to make races go. We struggle to get crowds out there, and we need to do something collectively as an industry to get more people involved, not less.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, do you see things that give you hope that the industry can get the ship turned around?
No, not right now. I hear people talk. I hear people with ideas, but I don't see any actions behind it.
Yeah. If I said, okay, Chad Summers is now king of racing, what would be a thing you might do to start that process?
Well, I think you have to look at the way that things have changed in the NFL and the NBA. You have to model yourself certain things. We've kind of come under that model of kind of dog racing and boxing, which is in just as bad a position as us, where UFC and Texas Hold'em have taken a stronger hold. The first thing you have to do is you got to get the horsemen on the same page as everybody else. You got to figure out what the entry issue is. You got to get to breeders and figure out how to breed more horses, and not shrink the horse population, but grow the horse population. And you got to get new fans in the seats. You gotta make a conscientious effort. You guys are blessed, and you have a guy like Lamar Jackson, who is among the faces of Baltimore, who really seems like he gets into these things. And yet he wasn't at the Preakness. He's been at the Preakness before at Pimlico, I believe. But he wasn't there at Laurel. He tried that racetrack lead. He's brought some people with him to the track, youths and stuff like that over the last couple of years. And I know, talking to Billy Knopf, the head of Laurel Racing, he says he's been great. You need ambassadors of the game that you can get. And, if it crosses over, people give the Griffin kid a hard time, but he's got a ton of followers, and it's helped put eyeballs on our seats. We've done some of these Netflix shows. I don't know about the one from last year, but I've done stuff in the past with the Hennigan brothers, who obviously famously did a First Saturday in May. They did some stuff with America's Best Racing this year, doing some short story TikTok stuff. Trying to keep the young America's attention span for more than 30 seconds is difficult. But doing ways to try and get fan engagement, and you need that. One of the reasons why the racing's so popular in Japan is because of the fan engagement. One of the reasons why racing's so popular in Hong Kong is because the handicappers have confidence that they have all the information they can possibly need, and then some. We sit here in America, we go, well, we can't beat the CAW, so we bet less. And it's just the opposite way of doing things. And we have to look at ourselves in a microscope and see what our issues are. And Rome's not built in a day. You can't address every issue at once, but you got to start. And there's got to be a dialogue and action behind it, not just dialogue, and try to solve these issues.
Well, those are really good points, and I think the starting point, in a sense, that I think you said is you got to move. We can't be all moving in different directions as all separate entities, right? You can't be the breeders go one way, the horsemen go another way, the tracks go a third way. If we can't all move together, we can't solve these problems. Wanted to touch on one more thing, as long as I got you, and then we'll let you go. But did not have on my bingo card this year that the Triple Crown would have so much of the Chuck Simon training tree, our mutual late friend Chuck. You worked for Chuck earlier in your career. Talk about that influence.
Chuck was just a part of my personality. I never forget the ex-official. It's the Americans. Chuck worked for him for a long time, and he was definitely somebody that rubbed off on Chuck and thought Chuck a lot. And he kind of taught us a lot. He was just a guy that loved the sport. I'm not sure anybody loves horse racing, its problem and its solutions than he did. And, the time that I spent working for him, and even had to my best, I would speak to him basically every couple of weeks. And he got sick up in Sarasota. I'd drive up and spend some time with him up there. But he's sorely missed, and I couldn't be happier to be with Cherie and Phil the model and so many other people that worked under Chuck Simon and part of his trades.
Yeah, it's I used to talk to Chuck every few months. We would talk about, he would call or I would call it, we'd sort of bemoan the state of racing. I mean, he really wanted this sport to get its stuff together.
Couldn't agree anymore with you, Frank.
Yeah. All right, I'll leave you with this thought. Chad Summers, I appreciate you being here. You will go down as the only trainer to win the Preakness at Laurel Park, and you'll join a record holder. The 1.5 mile turf record holder at Laurel Park is Kelso, so you're keeping pretty good company there.
We'll sign up for that any day of the week.
All right, Chad Summers, thank you very much for taking time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Now here's John Piassek on Maryland Racing Today, powered by the
All
Racing
right,
Biz.
he is John Piassek. I'm Frank Vespi. We are without Mackenzie Pfeiffer. Mac, going to get married. Congratulations, Mackenzie. Exciting stuff. Absolutely. But John, we got some horse racing to talk about. Let's start with weather. It just blah weather, rain, off the turf Friday, off the turf Saturday. Sunday was canceled at Fair Hill. They raced Monday over the jumps at Fair Hill because, according to the people who do the jump thing, that's the softer ground is better for them. But at the speeds that thoroughbreds are going in flat racing, not so much. So just a lot of rain, John.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where I always hear people say, boy, we really need rain. It should be nice if it rained. And then last weekend, a monkey's paw kind of curled, and we got just absolutely pounded with rain all weekend long. Even like the morning workouts on Tuesday, the track was listed as muddy. So it was definitely a situation where it was very, very wet. Definitely made for, relatively unappealing racing, as even the dirt races got hit with scratches. Really no one, I guess, wants to race in that much mud. But fortunately, a lot of those Fair Hill races were written back for this weekend. They all filled up, so we got some big cards this weekend. Hopefully, the rest course dries out a bit so we can get back on that this weekend. And especially with no Aqueduct this weekend, and I was taking a little break in between Napoleon Stakes Festival, the pools should be very juicy.
Well, let's hope for the best. The Maryland Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association and the Maryland Jockey Club instituted a program to try to get horses to stay in when races come off the turf, 20% increase in the purse if 7 or more runners stay in. So far, it has not had any impact. I don't believe any of the turf races, off the turf races, stuck got to 7. Is that right, John?
I think one.
Okay.
In the first race on Friday had 8, but I mean, it's a great idea on paper, and it's still a very small sample size.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we don't get too many more chances to see how it plays out. But at least this weekend, really not all the money in the world could not get people to stay in and run on the very sloppy surface.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of trainers are going to make that calculation of, if I'm going to finish 7th, I'm going to finish 7th, and it really doesn't matter how big the purse is, because 7th doesn't get any of it. But we'll see. Maybe it will play out. Last year, I believe they only lost one day to only one day was off the turf all season. Mm-hmm. So we're ahead of that already, which is unfortunate, but hopefully we're about to be done with being off the turf. All right. On a cheerier subject, John, let's talk about 2-year-olds. We've had 4 baby races so far at Laurel. 2 Corrales winners, a Salzman. 2 Rob winners, a Corrales winner and a Salzman winner, which kind of is a roundup the usual suspects scenario. Those are the trainers that typically fill these early 2-year-old races. Anything jumping out to you?
Well, on Friday, we saw another winner for Jerry Robb. That was the Stork Club, who was actually scratched a few weeks ago, showed back up in here and won. I thought she ran a very nice race on debut. Battled with her stablemate Paris by Night, who went off at 3-5. Those two hung around, ended up coming in 1st and 3rd, respectively. Gypsy Lullaby, one of the Corrales trainees in that field, I think is one to watch for next time. She was on the pace early, backed off of it, closed very well while wide, ended up losing by only 3/4 of a length. So I think she'll be worth watching second time out. Of course, Jerry Robb has his embarrassment of riches in the 2-year-old department. Curious to see where all of them go. Then on Saturday, there were 3 horses in the field who had experience, and they finished 1, 2, 3. Remember the word for Corrales dueled with Rob Cheney, Pelican Pier down the stretch, ended up winning by a head. Island Bandit was well bet that afternoon, but really did not do much. It was kind of a mild 3rd. He's now finished 3rd in each of his 2 starts, I believe both times as the favorite. So he might make things hotter this summer because he might burn up a lot of money.
Well, we'll see about that. I think, interestingly enough, on Friday, Rob held off Corrales. On Saturday, Corrales held off Rob as they go 1-2 in both races. A couple of the Rob trainees might head to Kentucky for their next start. He likes to go down there and run I've got a couple of early 2-year-old stakes, like maybe next month.
Well, it worked for him last year when he won the Bashford Manor with Romeo and sold him for a pretty penny after that race. So I guess he's hoping that lightning strikes twice.
Yeah, he's won. It's not the first time he's done that. I mean, it's probably the first time he's turned early 2-year-old winner into $1.7 million, but not the first time he's won down there. And he's also he also won one of the races up in New York a couple of years ago with was it Studley Do Right?
Yes, it was back in 2024.
So yeah, he's had a history of taking these 2-year-olds on the road and doing pretty well with them. So that's probably something to watch for. Corrales told me, remember the word he thinks is a horse that's going to want more ground. I mean, he's happy to get the win, but I think he thinks a little farther is going to be a little better for him. So we'll see where that runner shows up. Anything else catch your eye this past weekend, John?
No, just the fact about how muddy it was. I will say one angle that came into play on Saturday, and it kind of shows why paying attention to a circuit on a day-to-day basis can be important. In the official 8th race on Saturday, number 3, Change My World. At first glance, he looked like a always the bridesmaid, never the bride type. He had 1 million third-place finishes on his record. He had kept losing at this condition. And so first thought is, he's just a constant runner-up. I'm not going to bet him. But if you look at his running lines and you know who these horses are, he was competing against much better rivals than the ones he saw last Saturday. I know he lost to Paco the Taco Man at least once, who has been in very blinding form. And this field he faced Saturday was not nearly of that caliber. So we got to figure that it was, in a way, a drop in class. He'd be much better off in that field. And he won. He sat the trip off of a loose leader, and some paid, all things being equal, a generous $5.40, and the heavily bet Parks shipper Easy Action did what a lot of Park shippers tend to do and not run well here in Maryland. So it goes to show oftentimes it pays to look beyond just the running lines.
No, that's good advice always. I was talking with Suzanne Statinius the other day, who was asking who did our Maryland handicapping on the racingbiz.com. And I said, you did. And she said, well, how did he know about my horses running in the point-to-points? And which has been a handy little thing to know in the early turf racing the last few years, as some of the trainers use the point-to-points as kind of a last training run before running at Laurel. So
right. And it pays to know which trainers like doing that. It pays to know the schedule. Like you even dive in to see who they beat, because a lot of times it's kind of a hodgepodge of different horses, and sometimes there'll be a maiden who beat or did well against winners, and now this pari-mutuel racing against maidens is a big drop in class. So that's information that you only find out if you really do the homework.
Yeah, no, for sure. Or you read John's column on racingbiz.com.
Less homework.
All right, let's look ahead to this coming weekend. Assuming we're on the turf, got an old friend coming in Friday in a pretty rugged race, John, which I believe is carded as the third race.
That's correct. It is a third level allowance optional claiming 5.5 furlongs on the grass, and it marks the 7-year-old debut of a horse who needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. He's a fan favorite. He's won stakes races, I think, every year since the 2-year-old season. And that is number 1, Witty. A 2-time stakes winner last year, ran, I thought, just a gigantic race in the Jim McKay Turf Sprint on Preakness Day 2025. Came from 11 lengths out of it on a grass course that was favoring speed, one going away, got up to win the Van Cleef Stakes with a 9-wide sweep over Had to Have Him, who came back to win the Laurel Dash. He has not raced since September 6th, when he was third in the DeHaas Stakes, but he's done well off of long layoffs before, and the figure trainer, Neumann, who trains, co-owns, and bred him, knows him very well and will have him in good shape for today's race as he inches ever closer to $1 million in career earnings. He's currently at $914,000. We'll see if he can get to that 7-figure mark by the end of the year. Probably his biggest competition in that race is number 7, Nothing Better, for Jorge Duarte. Horacio Caramanos has the mount. He's a 12-time winner, most recently 4th in a stakes quality allowance race at Churchill Downs last November, and he was stakes placed, in fact, back in 2024, and was stakes placed last year. Even though he has the outside post, he has blazing speed from the outside. Got to figure he'll be able to cross and clear. However, his first start off a long layoff last year was not that great. He needed a bit of time to round into his best form. He might need a race. Other interesting horses in there are the 5, Saxton, who showed some promise in his 3-year-old season last year, a 2-time winner on grass, making his 4-year-old debut for Brittany Russell, and the 6, When I Get to Heaven, who won the Ben's Cat Stakes here last year and followed up with the win in the Burt Allen at Colonial Downs.
And X, it's a pretty good try in the King T. Leatherbury April 18th win. Third beat a length and a little bit by Outlaw Kid and Chasing Liberty, who then turned around, flipped positions, went 1-2 in the Jim McKay Preakness weekend.
Yes, so definitely a key race there. Even though it's a pretty salty field here, this might be considered a bit of a class drop, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he does second off the bench.
Yeah, no, it's a really good race actually. I mean, those three horses are legitimate, and all stakes winners, and two of them over 900,000 in the bank. So that's going to be a fun race. That's the third race Friday. Definitely one for people to pay attention to. I want to flip ahead to Saturday, John, and just got to get this race called up here. But another old friend returning to action, and that is last year's champion Maryland-bred 3-year-old Barbadian Runner.
Yes, who had a tremendous season last year, a 5-time stakes winner. Probably his biggest moment came when he won the Maryland Midlantic Classic over post time by 3/4 of a length, and followed that up with the win in the Richard Small. When last seen on this track, he was second to post time in the Bob Manfuso, and that one's kind of in post time's kind of swan song race. Henry Walters gave him a planned break after that race. He acknowledged that he had had a busy season. Figured he would give him a bit of time off, and this one made his return in a really stakes quality allowance race at Charlestown last time out. Do not let the fact that it was at Charlestown fool you. That was a fantastic field that night. He went off as the big favorite, made a huge 5-wide move, of course not easy to do, on that bull ring, and lost by a neck to stakes winner Preakness-winning. For his first start in so long, it was a great effort. He's stretching out from 7 furlongs to 1 mile and an 8, a distance at which he is a perfect 2 for 2, and is facing, I think, a softer field than he did last time. Probably his most dangerous competition is the one Indy charges on, who has hit the board in his last 10 starts. He's done fantastic work since being claimed by Anthony Ferrier last September, and has speed from the inside. So I guess we'll see if Indy charges on, takes them all the way, or if Barbadian Runner can mow him down.
Well, that's my question to you, John, is in that race that Barbadian ran at Charlestown against Preakness-winning, Preakness-winning got to the front and they walked. Mm-hmm. They could not have gone slower than they did. If they had gone slower, they would have all just, lay down on the track and gone to sleep. I mean, they were going slower. It was I believe the slowest half mile of any 2-turn race that night at Charlestown. And these were by far the best horses that ran that night at Charlestown. And so Preakness-winning had enough in the bank to hold off the late run from Barbadian. This race feels like it could be that race again, with the one horse the only speed in here.
It's possible, but I think that the fact that Barbadian Runner almost won in spite of all that just speaks to how much class and ability he has. And it was his first start off a 4.5-month break, and of course a spot like that was not quite his target. And I also don't think Indy charges on has been quite as sharp as he was over the winter. He's won some big races on the lead, and he's probably going to get the easiest setup he has in some time, but he's also never had to hold off a horse a caliber of Barbadian Runner. So I think it might get interesting late. I think Barbadian Runner might have to call on that class again, but I do think he'll wear his way past Indy charges on.
I am curious to see. This feels like you don't want to oversell it, but this feels like a meaningful start to Barbadian Runner, kind of like what your next move is going to be. This is going to have to play into that decision, because I think, one pretty logical spot for him could be the Charlestown Classic in August at 1 mile and an 1/8 on a track he's won on before for $1 million.
Yes, and of course he's already a stakes winner at Charlestown. He won the Robert Hilton last year in what was kind of his coming out party on a national stage. So, as you said, second off the bench, I think it is going to be kind of a test. He will have to take a step forward off of that race to show that he belongs in a race like the Charlestown Classic. Figure that he'll get a start or two in between. Could see him in a spot like the Monmouth Cup on the Haskell Undercard, for instance. He is also a stakes winner on the Jersey Shore, and he's already had $818,000 in career earnings. Obviously, a Charlestown Classic is worth $1 million. It's not impossible if he keeps up his form that he'll go over certainly over $1 million fairly soon. And I think $2 million is not out of the question. And I think since Ben's Cat, I don't know if a Maryland sired horse has even come close to earning $2 million. So that would be obviously a major accomplishment for.
Well, Nick's Go.
No, Maryland sired.
Oh, sired. Yeah, right. He I mean, he made 700,000 something last year. So if he continues to run at the level he's at, he'll surpass $1 million this year. And if he takes a step forward as a little bit older horse, then they'll be breathing down the neck at $2 million, which would be fun.
$1,000 yearling purchase.
It's a terrific story. I mean, Henry Walters hadn't won a stake in like 20 years, and then won 5 of them last year with this horse. And the horse he's hickory, man. He danced every dance, went all over the place, ran good races everywhere, ran good races going short, going long, whatever you want him to do. Beat Post Time on Post Time's track. I mean, it's his track too, but it just, what a great story it was. And the owner, AJ, is his granddaughter. So just a lot of cool pieces to the story, but a $5,000 Barbados yearling, Barbados now standing at Ronnie Brown's place in West Virginia. You just can't beat the story. So as somebody who likes a good racing story, you got to hope for this story to keep going and even get better.
Oh, I mean, as I've said, it can be a cliched phrase, but it's really what the sport is all about, especially in this era of, same few trainers having all the big horses and these horses barely running and training up, and a certain individual not coming to Maryland for a big race. It is very refreshing to see a horse like Barbadian Runner, as you said, compete in so many stakes races. I think he ran in 11 of them last year and maintain his form all year. If there were more Barbadian runners out there, this sport would be in a much better place.
You got that right. Amen. Yes, what we don't need is more horses that run 6 or 8 or 10 races in their career and retire. What we need is more horses like this. Yep. I mean, it's not really the topic, but it's impossible to sell this as a sport when many of the top athletes almost never perform.
Right. I mean, sports are really only interesting for the story. And in the past, even Derby horses, had raced enough times before the race that they had built up a narrative. Now, that doesn't really happen. And even if a horse goes into the spotlight, we don't see them that often afterward before they're whisked away to stud. I mean, 3 years ago, Oak Angelo made a big national splash when he won the Belmont Stakes, and Jenna Antonucci became a celebrity for a little bit. There was a chance for the sport to really get a lot of momentum, and he raced exactly one more time after that, and that was it. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not a trainer. I don't know these horses, so I don't want to armchair quarterback. But, again, it would be much better if horses were bred and trained to be able to withstand longer campaigns and become more of folk heroes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's clearly true. And likewise, they get whisked off to stud, and you get it, right? The money all lines up in one direction, and it's hard to ask people to put that aside and do something else. But, the well-being of the industry would be significantly aided if all these 3-year-olds came back rather than going to stud. And I don't know, maybe somebody's going to emerge out of this crop of 3-year-olds. We'll see. But I don't know. It feels like a conversation that's been being had for a long time with very little impact on either the incentive structure or the decision making. So anyway, one other race I want to talk about on Saturday, John, is another third level allowance, which is it the race? It's the race before the Barbadian Runner. This one, fingers crossed, on the turf. Another nice group of horses here.
Yes, I think the two standouts, at least in my book, are horses who actually raced against each other here back on November 15th. That's the 2 Siege of Boston and the 5 Jack's Legend. That afternoon, Jack's Legend was on the pace, made a move in the stretch, kind of got outkicked, and Siege of Boston swooped the group from last and won going away. Siege of Boston was well up the track against better in 2 starts at Gulfstream Park over the winter. Jimmy Toner gave him a bit of time off. Now he's back here. He's a little bit inconsistent. He has a very high ceiling, but he's also run plenty of clunkers both over the winter and just throughout his career. But he clearly has a huge upside, and what we heard from late, Jack's Legend has a lot of speed, which I think makes him very interesting. He went gate to wire against second level company back on October 24th over Skies Not Falling, who is also in this race and is another crusty veteran, a 10-time winner with earnings of over $600,000. There's a bit of speed in here, day and age in his first start. But Todd Wyatt has speed from the inside, as does Regala, who pulled off a 23-1 upset while on the pace on this track last June. But I think if anyone is going to steal this race, it's going to be Jack's Legend.
Well, Jack's Legend is a neat horse. I mean, he's trained by Kenny Cox for Michael Harrison, and he's a half to talk show man who was a very popular Maryland horse of a few years back. So he's one that you feel like he could get a following if he can string together a nice campaign.
Absolutely. And I know he's had a bit of a stop and start career. He's a 6-year-old and he's only raced 9 times, but he had a fairly busy campaign last year. He raced 6 times, won twice, came in third in the Maryland Million turf behind a gate to wire winner in Coringa, who just snuck away on the lead and was not able to be caught. You got to figure they have a Maryland Million turf date already circled on their calendar. He's coming third in that race twice, in fact, and you figure this year he might be used a bit more aggressively in the early stages and try to do what Coringa did.
Yeah, interesting thing. You go back to the beginning of his career in 2023. He won at first asking going 5.5 furlongs. Back then he was trained by Mike Trombetta. Trombetta immediately turns around and puts him in the Maryland Million turf going 1 mile and an 1/8. And he runs an absolutely fantastic race, just can't quite get to Wicked Prankster, who was another gate to wire winner. So you can see the Trombetta barn thought very highly of this horse right from the get-go, and he could be poised to start to deliver on, kind of early promise.
Well, I was working down in Maryland at the time of his first Maryland Million turf engagement, and I remember he was kind of the wise guy horse all week, being like, I know he's only raced once, but he's got the pedigree. He has a lot of upside, and as you said, he may have been the best horse in that race. I don't think anyone was going to catch Wicked Prankster the way that race played out. But the fact that he made up that much ground at second asking is a pretty huge accomplishment. So, as I said, his ceiling's very high, and I think it'll be on display on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to those 2 races. Anything else on your radar screen for this weekend, John?
Not in particular. I mean, as I said, it is going to be a great weekend to bet. Very nice fields all weekend long. Should be a lot of big pools. And one thing I want to note also is a lot of races this weekend were originally scheduled for Fair Hill on Sunday, and they've been brought back as extras. So if any of these horses look familiar to you, that's why. So anyone who handicapped Fair Hill for Saturday morning, such as myself, have a pretty big edge, I think, on a lot of other people handicapping. So let's keep that in mind. And of course, be sure to look at centralentryoffice.com and get your point-to-point results there, because a lot of these horses did compete in point-to-point races this spring, so they're not coming off as long of layoffs as one might expect.
Yeah, there's some other website they should look at, John, to get your picks. Which one is that?
Let's call the racingbiz.com, run by a wonderful man, Frank Vespi. You can find picks for not only Lowell, but Charlestown and Delaware. Get insight on what's going on in the Mid-Atlantic and listen to fine podcasts such as this one. Yeah, big cards this weekend, 11 races Saturday, 10 more Sunday, so 30 races at Laurel this weekend. So busy weekend coming up. Right now it's gray. It's supposed to rain more today, but today's Wednesday. Let's hope that we're in the clear by the weekend and able to stay on the turf. Well, I will say Logan Freeman and his crew do an amazing job with the grass course. It's a total 180 from the way it was a few years ago, where if it rained on a Monday, they'd be off till Friday. They do a fantastic job maintaining it. They kept us on till late November last year, and you have to figure they'll do all they can to keep us on.
Oh, for sure. If we're not on this weekend, it's only because it's been raining for days and days and days, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yep. So, all right, fingers crossed. Some good races on tap. Some things we're looking forward to. John Piassek, thank you very much for joining me here on Maryland Racing Today.
It is always a pleasure. Best of luck this weekend, and I'll see you next week.
All right, that's going to do it here for us on Maryland Racing Today, powered by the Racing Biz, the racingbiz.com, presented by the Maryland Jockey Club. My name is Frank Vespi. Maryland Racing Today is part of the Midlantic Racing Today family of podcasts, which also includes Charlestown Races Today and Delaware Park Today. Thanks so much to John Piassek for joining us to talk everything at Laurel Park, to Preakness-winning trainer Chad Summers for joining us for a few minutes to talk about his journey. And of course, thanks to you for listening and watching. We appreciate it very much, and we'll catch you next week right here on Maryland Racing Today.